Darkest Dungeon! I am your master now! Welcome to the finale! Darkest Dungeon is complete! I am the king! And what a road it was to get there, man. Decisions made in the favoritism of, like, being a streamer compared to, like, what I probably would have done at home. Oh, man. I was terrified of this dungeon because we knew so little. It's the final run. Last boss. Kill the evil landlord, which had been renamed, given our recent housing situation, had been changed to the evil landlord who needed to be defeated. And all we knew after sending our poor Elandra, our abomination, in, is that they did a lot of bleed. And there was ads, and the boss had 5 HP. So my mechanical brain was working a lot. Like, if you were watching this live, which a lot of people were, you could see that I was, like, theorizing extensively about how this works. Because one thing I can say about Darkest Dungeon is it follows rules. It follows, like, kind of baseline rules. And we'll get to a conclusion of what I think of the game in a second. But the rules are kind of there. If you've got a boss with, like, 5 HP, or you've got, like, a large boss with a tiny boss at the back, like you do with the Swine King, then there's a lot of hints there, classically, as to what you're supposed to do. Like, you're probably not supposed to kill the small one, because it's bait. It's a low HP small thing. You're probably not supposed to do it. And if you've got a final boss with 5 out of 5 HP, then the probability is, with a lot of resistances, is that you don't kill the boss. So I had power leveled a couple of characters who I kind of initially thought I wanted to have. We had no healers left, so I power leveled Susuno, who is a Vestal, to level 6. And also it caused a lot of stress damage, so we wanted a Jester. And also we needed bleed removal, so I power leveled a Plague Doctor who can remove it. But all the way through this, my brain is going like, how does this fight work? How does this fight work? And what didn't help at all is I power leveled these characters, but they had horrible traits. Absolutely horrible. Like, I think Susuno, our Vestal, our only healer, had like 3 bad traits, which would have been like 3 weeks or 3 other dungeon runs to correct and a lot of money investment, which is kind of dull when you're on the precipice of doing the final dungeon. And my live chat has been harassing me, calling me a staller, although I will say I've never done a single superfluous run just for doing its sake. In Darkest Dungeon, they've always had a purpose, a goal to move towards, but I'm at the point where I kind of need to do that, and I could level some of the characters, because we might die in the Darkest Dungeon. In fact, I kind of resigned myself to the fact that we're not going to kill this first go. I know that. I don't know. I have a feeling. So what I did was try and muddle through how the boss would work. I was like, the likelihood is, based on what we've seen of Darkest Dungeon, and it having 5 out of 5 HP, is his HP is probably linked to the ads in some way. And the ads are very low health, they have very low resistances, so we probably want to either kill or CC the ads, which do all the damage, because we did see that the boss heals the ads, which makes me think, like, okay, the ads are probably tied to the boss. So I was really in deep consideration of what we should do here. So what I did is, while trying to fix up the team, is I made a mock version of that team, because I could replicate the kind of team I wanted to take, which was a Vestal, a Plague Doctor, a Bounty Hunter, and maybe a Leper, because I needed good damage from somewhere, and I was really toying with bringing a Grave Robber for lunges and things like that. So I made like a mock team of a lower level and took them out, and they didn't perform particularly well. And it started to dawn on me as like, things that require setup are capable of doing massive amounts of damage. Like, if you take a Grave Robber who shadow steps so they get double damage, and then you blight the target, or you mark the target, but mainly if you have blight on the target, then they get another, like, 33-40% damage bonus on top of their 100% damage bonus onto that lunge. And then if you put trinkets on them with a good chance to critically strike, you could also debuff the target to make sure they get critically strike, to guarantee it more. You know, it's not a guarantee, but you get the idea. I can land like an 80 plus or 90 plus damaging hit every 2 rounds. I can do that. However, it became apparent, and I will admit, I wasn't 100% how this works. At the end of any blind playthrough that we do, at the end of it, people go, okay, this is what you missed. And there's always something very basic in there that I didn't notice. Is for some reason, when I was doing this mock run, is that Mark was just disappearing. Like, I was putting Mark up and it was just going away. Like, it wasn't up by the time we came back around. I was like, I don't really understand how this works. Like, for me, it was like each, you know, it's up for 3 rounds. It should be up for, you know, I apply mark and then I get like 2 attacks with it. But that wasn't happening in some instances. And I was like, so realistically, and this is where I'm muddling through, is like, if I want to kill these ads, I kind of need characters that don't require a lot of setup. Because I need them just to do damage. I can't rely, and this kind of then like counted out the Plague Doctor. Because the Plague Doctor requires damage over time. That's how they do massive damage, but they need several rounds for it to like ramp up and do things as the blight ticks. So I was like, that's probably not going to work for me, but they do have stun. So who doesn't require massive amounts of setup and does damage? Well, my Bounty Hunter, massive just crushing damage. Huge crushing damage and can mark targets and works well. So I then was, and works in different positions. So then it dawned on me, it's like, perhaps I need characters that will work well in different positions. Because a lot of advanced bosses in Darkest Dungeons, you shuffle your characters around in some way. So I probably want that functionality. So I was like, okay, well, the problem with like a leper, if they move out of position, if they move to like row 3 or 4, then they're not very good. They can't really do anything. So I was really toying with this idea. And then it dawned on me, it's like, maybe I don't even need a healer. Like, if, because we don't have any trash to get there, which would constitute a healer. And they do bleed and stress damage. They also do so much stress damage, which we found out with our Abomination, that I can't really out-stress them or de-stress them with a Jester. It's not going to do enough. So I was like, okay, we could drop the Jester. All this messing around. So I was ready to go. Realistically, I was ready to go. But it wasn't perfect. It wasn't perfect. And I landed on this team to go in under the proviso that they were probably going to die. I landed on Bounty Hunter, Leper, because I was like, okay, I can use other people to get the Leper up there. I landed on using a Grave Robber because I can set up every other round to do massive damage, which will like one-shot an ad or perhaps deliver damage to the boss, because I'm assuming there's a phase 2 to this fight, in which case there's likely to be something very healthy, in which case the lunge would be good. And then I went with a Hunter. And I went with the Hunter because Hound's Rush does big damage on its own, but also if we do get something larger later on, we can mark the target and lower dodge, lower protection, because we might get something like that. And they can heal themselves, because we haven't got a healer. So Leper and the Hunter can heal themselves if needs be, and I can use resources like bandages and resistance potions in order to counter this. So I was like, okay, I'll go with this. So into the dungeon we go. Healerless, but my goal is to find out what happens after the first phase, right? If I get through the first phase, I'll be pretty happy, because then I can adjust the party accordingly. And in we go. Nervous as hell. You can tell by my heart rate. We had the heart rate monitor on for this. All right. This is what was really cool about this. Is the boss spawned, and one thing I hadn't noticed in our Abomination thing, and I assume this happens every time, is you get the first turn regardless of what you want to do. So I Shadow Step my Grave Robber, and then I send in like my Bounty Hunter and my Leper and my Hunter into just killing. And they did. They like did that setup needed crushing damage. And they wiped the ads out. And then the boss spawned new ads, like incomplete copies or something like that, or damaged copies. And we managed to wipe out like all the ads, and just the boss was left. And then it killed these, and sure enough, the boss started to take damage. And I was like, solved it. Okay, it is as we predicted, it's based on the ads. So I'm going to just focus on the ads. And this works really well with this setup, because we were able to kill the ads very, very quickly. And sure enough, a phase 2 appeared. A big throbbing testicle monster that just had a ton of HP. Now, I might get my phases confused here, but we could just damage it. And it didn't really do much of anything. We could just damage it, and our crushing damage, we could mark the target now, and we had lunges available, so we were just doing big DPS to this thing. And it was fine, and then it changed into another phase. And I was like, another phase? And this one scared me to death. This terrified me, because now the boss didn't do anything. What it did do was if you hit it, it healed you. And I was like, and then it gave you blight, but you could resist the blight. And I was terrified here, because I was like, this is a healing phase. there's something horrible coming. Like, they've set up a phase where your party is probably going to be full health or close to it coming out of this. And that means there's something really, really bad about to happen. Really bad. I have to say, what happens next, as some of you will know who've played this game on the last boss, is exceptionally cruel. Like, really cruel. Especially your first time going in. Especially if you don't know this is going to happen, it's really nasty. And you'll see the realization on my face in a second. So then the final phase spawns. And it's not that its attacks are nasty. In fact, it was fine. It doesn't even have that much, that many hit points. Like, it wasn't that bad. But what it does do is force you to kill your own characters. And you have to choose. And I admit it's cruel and it's nasty. And in fact, the cruelest part of this, spoiler, I did kill this in the first go, is that you don't get those characters back afterwards if you win. Which I think is a little over the top. A little bit. I love the concept of what's happening here, is that you have to choose characters to die. And they basically, so you'll get one turn, at least this is what happened to me. I did find out later this is HP based, so it does it at like 66 and 33, but my characters were hitting very hard. I'd gone, obviously, with a very high damage trinket setup, because my goal was to just kill the ads. But it then just said, I can't even remember the name of the spell, but it was weird. It casted the spell, and then nothing happened, but I could mouse over my team. And I'm like, what is happening here? And it doesn't say anything on the screen, like, choose someone to die. But what they did do was put dialogue on the characters saying, I'm not ready to die. And I was like, am I choosing somebody to die here? And that's exactly what you're doing. You're choosing someone to die. So then the real cool depth of the game comes in, is obviously the big problem with killing your characters is that your positions are going to change. And so that's what it came down to, is like your positions are going to shift. And when that happens, you need to account for how this is going to affect us shortly. And so I'm weighing it up and I'm weighing it up and I'm weighing it up. And I decided that the best person to die here first was Targ, our leper. Because everybody else could just do bigger damage, potentially, and work around in different positions. And if we did get shuffled, it would be the leper that was in a problem. So, unfortunately, I chose them to die. And then it carried on, and then it cast the spell again. And I was like, I'm left with a hunter, a bounty hunter, and my highwayman. And I'd set my highwayman up for lunge. For a massive lunge. And then I was like, wait a minute, I need to check something. And my highwayman cannot cast lunge from the second position. So if I kill one of the other two, my highwayman, or grave robber I should say, my grave robber will be in a position where he can't do his massive potential damage. All he'll have is like pick to the face, which just doesn't hit hard enough compared to my hunter and my bounty hunter. And then it dawned on me that I probably have to kill this in the next 2 turns, even though he's got like half health left, because I'm just going to have one character left. And I was like, who's going to be the last person standing? And it's probably going to be my bounty hunter, although my bounty hunter was nearly dead. So, unfortunately, Boris, my friend Boris from Australia, had to die. And I was left with 2 characters with the remaining HP. And then, as far as I was concerned at this point, I now know that it won't kill. It won't cast the spell again, so you are left with 2 characters. But I didn't know that at the time. Like, as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to have to choose somebody else to die next. So I'm weighing it up. I'm like, how do I kill this in 2 turns? And I had to YOLO a stun. It was the only way. Like, the logic of what was happening here is the mark had fallen off the target. So my hunter was going to do way, way less damage. And also, my bounty hunter is going to do less damage. Both of them interact for huge damage with Mark being on the target, but Mark has fallen off and it's my turn. So I'm thinking through the thought process. I think it had like 50 or 60 HP left. I'm like, okay, I can either send the hunter, which will damage it and probably put bleed on it. And I can send the bounty hunter without Mark. And maybe with, like, lucky crits, we get where we're going to be. Or we'll be, like, 1 or probably 2 hits away from killing it. And that means that my bounty hunter will be... that not only in the next turn my hunter will die, and then the turn after that my bounty hunter will die, and we just won't have enough damage. I could apply Mark with my hunter, and then hope the bounty hunter can do 2 hits with markup, which will crit or do good damage, and kill it, but I will lose the hunter, and the hunter only contributes Mark. Alternatively, I can send a stun, gain an extra turn where we can apply Mark, they'll both be alive, and they'll both be able to do their big damage with markup. And so I sent it, and pressing this button was probably one of the most stressful things I've done in Darkest Dungeon, because if it didn't land, I had missed out on a turn of damage, and I was probably going to wipe. In my mind. I know now I would have been fine, because he wouldn't have killed one of the characters, but at the time, this is the situation in the game, and obviously, like, giving you the impression this is what was going to happen. The way I felt is how it was supposed to play out, like, as if you hadn't researched the boss. And so I did. I sent it. And the stun landed. The boss got stunned, the stun landed, and I was able to get Mark up, and now next attack crit. It all worked out well in the end, and I crushed the last boss into the floor. And victory was ours. And then it dawned on me, you don't get those characters back. So we salute Targ and Boris, who sacrificed their souls so that the Darkest Dungeon could be complete. And it's sort of like, rightfully so, a bittersweet ending to this game. Is like, we won, but at what cost, right? We won, but at what cost? There's 2 more lives. We're buried deep beneath the earth. And it's a great feeling. My conclusion to this game is I rarely come across a game that I just think it's just such good value for money for what you're getting here, because it's exceptionally well made. This game is always on offer. It was £3 to buy this game last week, because it's pretty old now. But it's timeless in its art style, so it doesn't matter how old it is. You could play this game in another 50 years, it will still be phenomenal, right? It's one of those games. It's like there's no time in it. And it reminds me of Terraria. Like, Terraria is dirt cheap, and you get hundreds of hours of gameplay out of it, and thousands in some cases if you start modding the game. And you just go on and on and on, and this is the game that's the same. And the art style will perpetually work. It will work fine it'll work fine in 100 years. People will be able to go and be like, oh, this game is phenomenal. Like, it's so well made. And Darkest Dungeon will be in the same. And in fact, the premise of Darkest Dungeon that dawned on me later on is it's the best of turn-based RPGs. Your classic Chrono Triggers, your Final Fantasies, all those games, it is the best of what those games offer, because it starts at a more advanced level. It doesn't start... In fact, now you've played the whole game, you realize that it's actually quite gentle on you in the early days. Like, you can lose people and you can have party wipes, but it's so cheap to replace them, and you haven't invested a lot in them usually, that it's fine. And it's rare that actually happens. Like, I didn't lose anybody at all to like week 18 or something like that. And it's kind of fun to be in, especially for me, it's like to be in that, like, the depth of what can happen in turn-based play, and where one decision can absolutely snowball into a problem that occurs later on. I had that with the drowned crew. Is like the approach I took was wrong, and it snowballed, and you just feel like you can't catch up again, and it's intentional because your strategy is incorrect. And it has all those elements, but just starts you way above like the baby farm fights that a lot of basic RPGs, turn-based RPGs, you know, the first few levels, excluding things like Final Fantasy 1 and 2, which are just nasty from the start, but you get the idea. It starts you with all these tools, all these options, 4 characters, like, from the start, with all their tools, and so many different combinations of things that can happen, that I truly loved that aspect, and it just gets better and better and better. Like, and I like that it is cruel, but at the same time, it's kind of fair. Like, the Collector could show up, but the Collector isn't that bad once you understand what the Collector does. The Shambler is always terrifying, but it lets you choose if you want to fight the Shambler. It's like, you can just fight the Shambler, check out your situation, check out your scenario. You could go and camp if you want to first, get some buffs. Like, you get the option. And even if your characters are compulsive or something and they touch the Shambler orb, you need a torch, so it won't set it off. If in anything, it's like, oh, it uses up your chance to get the Shambler if you want the Shambler for some really good trinkets. It's kind of fair, but also it knows, and it happens to me regularly, that it can just mess you up. If the dice roll against you, you could just lose people, which is what happened the day before, and that's part of the game. You can end up in some really bad scenarios. Fight 1 can go very badly for you in a long dungeon, And it's kind of hard to recover from that, but you can recover. There are ways and means. Maybe you have to camp early. Maybe you have to make these choices. Every dungeon run is different. Like, even the ones where I was, like, chilling, so it was like a leveling one. My guys are pretty powerful. I've got experience with the game, so I'm not too bad. Even then, you can run scenarios that engage you and really draw you into the game's world. Phenomenal game. Absolutely phenomenal. I did take a look at the DLCs because people keep asking. It's like, yeah, we will revisit this game with the DLCs. I saw the vampire one and the crystal one. But that will be in the future. We have a lot going on right now. So we've got Warhammer Summer coming up, all that kind of stuff. But this is definitely in my repertoire of things to do. I had a look at the trailer for Darkest Dungeon 2. I understand what people are saying now is it's a totally different game. It's very, very different. But also there have been some massive mods. I can't remember the name of it now, but there's one where you're on an airship for Darkest Dungeon 1, which essentially could be expansions unto themselves that are player made. So there's endless content here. Absolutely phenomenal game. I rank it up there as S tier. Completely S tier. Add it to the list, Bex. That's what it is. I had a wonderful time. It played to my sensibilities perfectly. I was stressed out, frustrated, angry, and happy, and overwhelming, and puzzle solving. All the things that I love about a good, engaging game, and it did it from day one. Absolutely S tier. Loved it. Our next journey begins soon. To let you know, for those of you who follow me intently, I'm recording this on the morning of the thing that I announced and revealed. So, I'm in for a very exciting day. See you soon.